This video is brought to you by Skillshare. On Sunday the 22nd of October, there was a collision between Chinese and Philippine ships in the disputed waters of the South China Sea, or the West Philippine Sea if you're in the Philippines. The Philippines labelled China an aggressor that was increasing tension, while China said the Philippines had been trespassing and was smearing China's reputation with groundless attacks. It was not the first time that an incident like this had happened, and almost certainly will not be the last, as relations between the countries continue on a downwards trajectory. In this video, we'll look at recent events, explain the dispute in the South China Sea, and why China-Philippine relations are worse now than they were a few years ago. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. To understand the recent collision, we need to go back to 1999. In that year, the Philippines deliberately grounded a Second World War-era warship, the BRP Sierra Madre, on a small coral atoll in the South China Sea known as the Second Thomas Shoal, that China claims as its own. The goal was to use the vessel as a military outpost to assert its sovereignty over the shoal and surrounding seas in response to China's occupation of the nearby disputed Mischief Reef. To this day, the Sierra Madre continues to host a handful of Philippine Marines who man the outpost, which is rusting and falling apart. It relies on resupply missions which have often been interrupted by China, using things like physical maneuvers and even water cannons. Describing the most recent resupply mission, the Philippines said that the China Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels, in blatant violation of international law, harassed and intentionally hit a Philippine boat. The Philippine Defense Secretary called it an egregious violation of international law and an escalation of China's expansionist and aggressive action. China's description was less dramatic, saying that there had been a slight collision between vessels while its Coast Guard was lawfully blocking the boat from transporting illegal construction materials. This came not long after another incident involving a floating barrier installed by the Chinese Coast Guard at Scarborough Shoal, a disputed uninhabited atoll claimed by both China and the Philippines, but effectively controlled by China. China managed to seize the shoal from the Philippines back in 2012 following a months-long standoff, and has maintained a Coast Guard and fishing trawler presence, which has been described as a maritime militia. The Philippine Coast Guard said that the new barrier prevented Filipino fishing boats from entering the shoal, depriving them of their fishing and livelihood activities. In the end, the Philippine Coast Guard sent a diver who successfully removed the barrier, in what it called a special operation to uphold international law. The recent collision and the floating barrier incident are all part of a wider dispute over the South China Sea and China's so-called 9-dash line. The line demarcates the vast area of the sea, about 90%, that China claims as its exclusive economic zone, overlapping with competing claims by basically every country in the area: Taiwan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, and Vietnam. A decade ago, the Philippines took China to the Hague-based Permanent Court of Arbitration, with the court eventually ruling in 2016 largely in favour of the Philippines. Crucially, the court concluded that there was no legal basis for China to claim historic rights to resources within the sea areas falling within the 9-dash line. China refused to take part in the proceedings and rejected the ruling, which, while legally binding, has no mechanism for enforcement. The South China Sea, from far enough out, may look like an empty expanse of water, but is in fact littered with small islands, reefs, banks and shoals, which have become hotly contested territory. Satellite images show the extent to which China has been building up its presence on these disputed maritime features over the past decade or so, through land reclamation efforts and construction projects. In some cases, full artificial islands with runways, helipads, hangars, quays, large complexes, and other infrastructures have been built where previously there was basically nothing above the water. By building these permanent facilities, China is expanding its military capabilities and projecting its power further out from its mainland, despite President Xi Jinping nominally pledging in 2015 not to militarize the islands. The interest in the South China Sea is understandable, as exclusive economic zones grant the country in question the right to explore and exploit the natural resources of the waters, seabed and subsoil, thereby including everything from fish to oil to gas. In fact, alongside having rich fishing waters, some estimates say the South China Sea holds around 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. To add to the area's strategic significance, the South China Sea is also a hugely important maritime shipping route, so it's no surprise that it's hotly contested. So, given that the maritime disputes are not new, why have tensions recently increased between China and the Philippines? Well, a lot can be attributed to a change in leadership in the Philippines. Between 2016 and 2022, then-President Rodrigo Duterte adopted a more China-friendly foreign policy and even appeared to downplay a significant 2019 incident that saw the sinking of a Philippine fishing boat after a collision with a Chinese vessel at Reed Bank. Things changed when Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. became president in June 2022, and subsequently reinvigorated the Philippines' alliance with the United States, while taking a more outspokenly defensive stance against China. His government has been carrying out a policy of transparency when it comes to maritime incidents with China, which means documenting and recording every incident of harassment, spreading it on social media, and sharing it with journalists. For example, the collision we discussed earlier in the video was captured by a camera crew who were present on the ship itself, and the removal of a floating barrier was filmed and shared. Through this strategy of transparency, Marcos is hoping to draw attention to China's moves in the sea, pushing his allies into open condemnation of said actions, while also working to secure greater support from the likes of the United States. Amid all of this, the US and the Philippines have been expanding their defense cooperation. This year, the Philippines revealed the 4 military bases that the US would get access to under an existing pact, expanding its access from 5 to 9 bases. Additionally, it's been reported that the US may help develop a port in the northern Philippines, and are also looking to begin joint maritime patrols in the South China Sea. The US and the Philippines actually have a mutual defense treaty dating back to 1951, meaning the US will come to the defense of the Philippines if it's attacked. The US State Department reaffirmed after the recent incidents that this pact extends to armoured attacks on Philippine armoured forces, public vessels and aircraft, including those in its coast guard, anywhere in the South China Sea. But whether all this will deter China from its unilateral assertive actions in the South China Sea remains to be seen. In fact, in an area that's been described as a tinderbox, the risk of inadvertently provoking escalation shouldn't be overlooked. A few weeks ago, we told you that we were making a physical newspaper, but it turns out that designing a newspaper isn't all that easy. So we headed to Skillshare to take their course on the topic. Unlike when Jack tried to learn InDesign for another never-released project a few years ago, this time he was guided through the process quickly and efficiently, and this time the project will actually see the light of day thanks to Skillshare's incredibly easy-to-follow guides. In fact, here's an exclusive little preview of what we've been working on. It's not just that either. You likely already knew Skillshare for classes and things like photography, editing and illustration. But did you know that Skillshare also has hundreds of career-focused classes too? That's courses on everything from how to start a business to maximising your workflow or how to grow in e-commerce. Another course that Jack's taking to help him with the newspaper. And if you use our link, then you can get access to all of that for free. That's right, the first 500 people to use our link will get access to one of Skillshare's best offers. 30 days free and 40% off your first year of Skillshare membership. That's the best Skillshare offer we've ever had, so make sure you click our link in the description. Thanks for your support, and to Skillshare for sponsoring this video.